I opened my shed and my stomach dropped so hard it felt like I missed a step. My snowblower, my $2,000 winter survival plan, was trashed syrup smeared down the side like someone wanted it to rot, not just break. And standing there in the cold, I didn't think random vandalism. I thought they finally did it. A couple months earlier, none of this existed in my life. I'm Ethan Miller, mid-30s, work from home. The kind of guy who chose a quiet suburb outside Naperville because I figured rules meant peace. Oak Ridge Meadows looked perfect on paper, clean lawns, tidy sidewalks, polite smiles. Then you learn the neighborhood isn't managed by community spirit, it's managed by the homeowners association, and a person who treats a binder like a badge. The first real snowfall hit on a Tuesday, thick and heavy, the kind that turns your driveway into wet cement. I rolled out my brand new snowblower, hit the choke pulled once, and that engine came alive like it had something to prove. 20 minutes later, my driveway was spotless, and I was feeling pretty good until Frank Dalton shuffled over from next door. Frank's older, sweet guy, and he looked embarrassed even asking. "Any chance you could do mine too?" he said, nodding at my machine like it was a miracle. "I'll pay you." I told him to keep his money, and I cleared his driveway in one pass. It felt normal, neighborly even. Then Sarah Collins, the nurse down the street, asked if I could do hers after a night shift. I did it once because I'm not a monster. That's how it started. 2 favors. And suddenly, I was the snow guy. A few days later, my doorbell started going off while I was on a work call. I muted my mic, opened the door, and there she was, Linda Pierce. Perfect blonde bob, bright red coat, clipboard tucked under her arm, white SUV idling like a getaway car. She didn't say hi. She said, "We've had multiple complaints that you're refusing to clear snow for other residents." I stared at her for a beat. "I'm not running a business," I said. "I helped a couple neighbors once." Linda opened her binder right on my porch, flipped to a tab like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror, and tapped a paragraph. Section 12, Community Contribution. The board has discussed it. Discussed what I asked already, annoyed. She smiled like she'd caught me. "That you'll clear the main sidewalk routes. Residents can reimburse you. $10 per driveway is reasonable." I actually let out a laugh because it was that absurd. "No," I said plain and calm. "That's my equipment. If the homeowners association wants sidewalks cleared, it can hire someone." Her eyes narrowed. "Refusal will be noted," she said, and turned away like she'd just issued a court order. 2 days later, the first envelope arrived. Official logo, notice of violation. My shed was supposedly 3 inches too tall. 30 days to remedy, or $50 a day in fines. I'm a mechanical engineer. I own a tape measure, and I know how numbers work. I went outside, measured the shed twice, took photos, and emailed the HOA. Linda responded in under an hour. "The board's decision is final." That's when I felt it. This wasn't about a shed. It was about me saying no. After that, the notices came like clockwork. Trash bin visible too long, porch light too bright, lawn uneven in December, which is honestly impressive because the lawn was basically asleep under frost. It got to the point where I'd hear a car slow down outside and think, "Here comes another fine." I stopped enjoying my own home like the place I paid for had an invisible landlord with a grudge. One night I laid the letters out on my kitchen table and did the math. If this kept going, it wasn't just annoying, it was expensive. And here's the part I didn't want to admit out loud. For a few minutes I considered just paying and shutting up. Not because I thought Linda was right, but because I was tired. Then I pictured Frank trying to shovel in the dark, Sarah dragging herself home after a hospital shift, and Linda strolling around like she owned everyone. And something in me snapped back into place. Fine. If she wanted paper, she was going to get paper. I called a lawyer, Rachel Stone. Rachel listened, asked a few sharp questions, then said, "This is retaliation, and the way you beat retaliation is documentation and procedure." She told me to stop talking on porches, stop arguing on the phone, everything in writing, she said. Photos, dates, certified mail. And we request the records, meeting minutes, enforcement logs, inspection notes. That last part surprised me. We can make them give that up. Rachel chuckled. Bylaws are great when someone actually reads them. So I read ours. The entire Homeowners Association bylaws, start to finish, like it was a manual for escaping a trap. Buried in there was the path forward. Homeowners could trigger a special meeting. Homeowners could force a vote. Homeowners could remove a board member. It required signatures 20% of the neighborhood. That sounded impossible until I started knocking on doors. Frank answered immediately, looking guilty. "I didn't mean for this," he said. "This isn't your fault," I told him. "They're doing it because they think no one will push back." Sarah showed me her own stack of warnings, one about a kid's basketball hoop being too close to the sidewalk. She wasn't dramatic about it, just exhausted like she'd been swallowing irritation for years. And then I realized something that made me angrier than the fines. People weren't agreeing with Linda. They were avoiding Linda. So I kept it simple. No speeches, no rage. "Here's what happened," I'd say. "Here's the proof. Here's the bylaw that gives us a vote. If you're tired of selective enforcement, sign." Some neighbors wouldn't even open the door all the way. Some whispered like Linda might appear behind a hedge. But enough people signed. Quietly, firmly, like they'd been waiting for permission to stop being intimidated. Rachel filed the petition properly. Copies timestamped certified delivery. The whole thing looked like a court packet. The next day, Linda showed up at my house again. This time she brought her husband, Mark. Mark stood half a step behind her, arms crossed, trying to loom. "You're harassing my wife," he said, like he'd read it off a script. Linda's voice went syrup-sweet. "You're destabilizing the community," she said. "Property values matter." I held my phone in my hand, not waving it around, just holding it like a boundary line. "This conversation's over," I said. "Talk to my attorney." Mark scoffed, all this over a snowblower. That one sentence told me everything. To them, my time, my money, my equipment, none of it was mine if it could be pressured out of me. Then the big storm hit. The kind of storm that makes the news anchors act like the apocalypse is trending. Snow piled up fast, wind whipping it into drifts. The HOA's plow service didn't show. Sidewalks vanished. Cars spun at corners. I cleared my driveway because I had to function. I carved one clean path to the street, shut the machine down, and stood there breathing steam into my scarf. Across the street I saw Linda and Mark out there with shovels struggling. For 1 second I almost felt sorry. Then Linda spotted me and marched over, boots crunching face tight with fury. "Emergency situation," she said, breathless. "You need to provide your snowblower for community use." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't bargain. "No," I said. Her eyes went wide like she couldn't process the word. "We can levy additional penalties, and I can file additional complaints," I cut in, still calm. "Rachel Stone. Call her." Linda's mouth tightened into a line and she turned away like I'd insulted her personally by owning my own property. The special meeting happened the next week at the clubhouse, and the room was packed in a way I'd never seen. Folding chairs standing along walls, people who'd avoided Linda for years suddenly showing up like it was a fire drill. Linda tried to run the meeting like she always did, talk over questions, redirect, dismiss. But this time a neutral moderator was present because bylaws are funny that way. Neighbors stood up one after another. Sarah read her notices out loud. Frank talked about being fined years ago over a bird feeder. A guy in the back held up a folder and said his garage violations magically appeared the week he argued with Linda. When it was my turn, I didn't perform. I walked up, set down my documentation, and said, "This is selective enforcement. This is retaliation, and it stops." The vote was written ballot. Quiet. No room for Linda to twist it. When the count came back, the air changed. Linda Pierce was removed from the board. She stood there, frozen, blinking like her brain had hit an error message, then grabbed her binder and walked out stiff-backed without looking at anyone. I went home thinking, okay, it's done. 3 days later, I opened my shed and found my snowblower destroyed. I didn't call the homeowners association. I called the police. Rachel moved faster than I thought possible. Requests for camera footage, formal statements, a clean timeline. It stopped being HOA drama and turned into criminal damage. Then Linda's teenage son Tyler showed up on my porch alone. He looked pale, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. "I'm not trying to start anything," he said, staring at the wood like it could swallow him. "Then don't," I said quietly. He swallowed hard. "My mom, she didn't do it herself," he said. "But she paid a guy, Eddie Russo. I heard her on the phone." He didn't sound vengeful. He sounded trapped. Police followed that lead. Warrants followed the records. Eddie cracked under pressure and talked. And on a gray Thursday morning, I looked out my front window and saw a cruiser parked at Linda's curb. Linda stepped outside in her red coat, less powerful now, more desperate, talking fast, waving her hands like she could negotiate her way out of consequences. Then an officer gently turned her around, clicked cuffs closed, and guided her into the back seat. She looked across the street toward my house for a split second, and her eyes weren't smug anymore. They were stunned, like she'd just realized the binder doesn't protect you from reality. Never confuse a rule book with the right to control other people.